Hello and welcome to another episode of The Way I See It. I'm going to be talking about Ruth today, the Book of Ruth. Now you may be thinking, why are you talking about the Book of Ruth, Rachel? You normally do like a theme, an idea, some hot topic, something you just thought about. Well, the reason I'm talking about Ruth is because I have a friend named Andy Darnell and he asked me to do this. So this is a video I'm doing that I'm putting on my YouTube channel as a part of The Way I See It series, but also he's going to put it on his blog. So if you're interested in reading, he actually is going through the Bible in a year and blogging about each book, and he asked me to do a video about the Book of Ruth to be kind of a video blog entry, a vlog entry. So Ruth is pretty short, it's only 4 chapters, and I'm going to talk about some of the things you see develop through the story, and then of course tie it into the gospel, because every book in the Bible can tie into the gospel. So here goes. I have some notes I'm going to be referencing, and no, I don't have my red notebook. I didn't write these myself. This is actually from Bible Study Fellowship, and I'm just going to take a side note here to plug Bible Study Fellowship. If you're looking for some sort of in-depth group Bible study where you can meet in small groups and discuss books of the Bible, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, I highly recommend this. It's biblically sound, it's very in-depth, it's for men and women around the world, and it's free. So it's not thematic, it's not like we're going to do a Bible study on how to raise godly children or how to have a happy marriage or how to handle your finances. No, it's like we're going to study the Bible, and we're going to let the Bible inform us in all these other areas of our life. So a few years ago, I did a study on early part of the Israelite history, and this was part of the study because we were going into the early days up through King David, King Solomon, in that particular study. So the Book of Ruth takes place during the time of the Judges. So the book comes right after the Book of Judges. And it says it took place during the time of the Judges, so it's before Samuel, before King David. As you find out, that's part of the story, is that she winds up in the lineage of King David and Jesus. So this book starts off with this man named Elimelech and his wife Naomi and his 2 sons leaving Bethlehem to go across the Dead Sea to the Moabite country. Now, Moab was a nation of people that had descended from Lot, and Lot is Abraham's nephew. So they're distantly related to the nation of Israel, but they were forbidden to enter the assembly of Israel because of Moab's malice toward Israel. And it's interesting that they have to leave to go find food, that they're having this famine. They have to leave Bethlehem. They're from Bethlehem, the ancestral home that becomes the birthplace of Jesus. And they have to leave to go find food. When Bethlehem is called, like, that means house of bread. It means house of bread, and yet there's a famine and they're starving. So they go to enemy territory, kind of, basically. And while they're there, the sons marry Moabite women. So they marry outside of their faith, outside of their culture. And then the sons and the husband, eventually the husband, they all die. So Naomi, I mean, it's crazy. Like, they all traveled there as this family of 4, thinking we're just going to spend a few years here. And they never come back. I mean, by the time Naomi comes back, she doesn't have the family she left with. So once they've all died, Naomi is like, I got these 2 daughters-in-law, and we're just 3 women, 3 widows with no children. Luckily, no children, kind of. I mean, because they really had no way to provide for those children. We've got to have someone to take care of us. I have to go back to my ancestral homeland because that's the only place I have any connections for someone to take care of me. So she takes her daughters-in-law with her. I mean, they actually have a really good relationship. Orpah and Ruth. They love Naomi and they want to go with her. They want to leave their homeland, their culture, their religion, to go with Naomi. So at some point on this journey, she's thinking, things are bleak. Things are bleak up ahead. And really, out of a concern for the girls, she tries to send them home. Because if they're Moabitesses, they might never remarry. They might never find anybody to take care of them. That's a huge risk. So right here in the first chapter, as she's urging them to go home, she says in chapter 1, starting in verse 8, she says, I want to say I'm reading again from the Bible for Everyone, and the Old Testament here was translated by John Goldingay. So if anything reads kind of in a sort of not idiosyncratic way, the reason is because he translated it to be more literal. So some of the language is like, it might sound a little off. Ruth chapter 1 verse 8. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, get back, each one to her mother's household. May Yahweh act in commitment with you as you've acted with the dead men and with me. May Yahweh grant to you that you find a place to settle down, each one in the household of her husband. She kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and cried. They said to her, But we should go back with you to your people. So it's interesting right there, the word that in this translation is commitment. Usually is translated kindness, and it's actually a word that means multiple things, a very deep kindness, loving kindness, commitment. It's chesed. Chesed is the special committed kindness that Yahweh, God, had for the Israelite people. And she's, praying this over her daughters-in-law, that the Lord will show this to them because they have shown her deep commitment and kindness, thus far in coming with her. It's crazy because right now she says, my name should be called Mara. Well, she'll say this in the next, as she gets into town, back to her homeland, which means bitter. Her life is so bitter right now. She's just in a very terrible place. Because she's, not only is she a woman, she's a widow, she's older. She has no sons left. No one to take care of her. I mean, it's bleak. So eventually Orpah, crying her eyes out, decides, okay, you're right. We should go back. I'll go back. But Ruth may not understand she's being called by God himself because she's part of this big plan. She says these words that are often quoted in weddings. She says in verse 16, Don't press me to abandon you by turning back from following you, because where you go, I shall go, and where you stay the night, I shall stay the night. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I'll die, and there I'll be buried. So may Yahweh, and she's quoting the name of Naomi's God, not her own gods. Your God, may Yahweh do to me, and so may he do more if death divides between me and you. She's making a bold statement. She's saying, I'm willing to leave behind my culture, my religion. It's essentially a conversion moment right here. I'm going to follow not just you, I'm going to follow your religion. Your God will be my God. So they go on, they arrive back in Bethlehem, and Naomi means pleasant. Her life was pleasant when she left. She says, call me Mara when she comes back. She comes back and other women greet her, women who knew her. Probably been, 10 years that they've been gone. And in the meantime, she comes back probably looking a lot older from the stress and absent her husband and sons. And with this young Moabitess woman, that's her daughter-in-law. It's interesting here in the notes, it says, Naomi had suffered a terrible loss, yet she did not return to Bethlehem empty. God's love had reached through human brokenness and national and religious boundaries to make a despised Moabite his own. God had afflicted Naomi and emptied her so that he could bless and fill her. If you know the end of the story. So they arrive there, and, it's the spring, the harvests are beginning. We go into chapter 2. The very first verse kind of introduces us to Boaz, but it just it's like, now there was a relative of Elimelech's. His name was Boaz. And then it kind of goes back over here to, now back to the story. setting it up, setting it up. You're gonna see more. You're gonna hear more from Boaz. So Ruth asks Naomi if she can go and glean in the fields. She doesn't know whose field she's going to. She just goes to a field. It just happens to be Boaz's. So God is already controlling seemingly random kind of situations. A little backstory. God had commanded the Israelites certain laws to take care of the poor, the widows, the sojourners, the orphans. Some of it was to intentionally leave behind little bits of their harvest. Or if they accidentally forgot to grab one, don't go back and get it, leave it for the people who are gathering. So we see God's heart to help those who are destitute, those who are impoverished, those who are needy. God wants people who have to help the people who don't have. So while she's out there, Boaz notices her. I don't know if it's that she's attractive or if he had just come from the village and they were all talking about, Naomi just came back and she brought her daughter-in-law came with her. Her daughter-in-law left her homeland to stay with her mother-in-law. This Naomi chick is something special. Who knows? I mean, I can only imagine that because he had heard about her. Once he got out there, he'd heard about her already. And he asks, who's that over there? And they're like, oh, she's a Moabite girl who came back with Naomi from Moabite country. She said, please may I glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. She came and stood from then in the morning until now. Her stay in the house has been short. So after this young worker says who she is, Boaz goes over to her and he says, okay, look, I want you to stay in this field because this is where you'll be safe. She could go to some other field and she could be raped. I mean, she could be attacked just because people don't like Moabites. So he says, stay here in this field because I want you to be safe. So already his character is a notch above because he wants to protect this stranger, this person he doesn't even know. He may know that Naomi is a relative of his. There may also be that kind of element of his concern for Ruth. Or who knows, maybe he's seen her and he's attracted to her and he wants to get to know her, who knows. He's obviously an admirable person though. So Ruth thanks him for that and he says, it's already been told to me what you've done for your mother-in-law. So maybe he heard about it in Bethlehem before he came out to his fields. Maybe they had already been talking. Hey, Naomi came back and her Moabite daughter-in-law came back with her. This girl is attached. She wants to take care of and stay with Naomi. So he'd already heard about her, how she had abandoned her father and mother in the country she knew. So he admires her for that. And here he says a prayer of blessing over her. Starting in verse 12, chapter 2. May Yahweh make good for your deed. May your wages be complete from Yahweh, the God of Israel, under whose skirts you've come to take shelter. Now, right there, that word skirts, in most translations it says under whose wings you've come to take refuge. But the fact that it's translated skirts here is important because it's going to come back into play here in another chapter. And then he invites her to eat lunch with him and his, other workers. So he just keeps heaping, one good thing onto another. It's okay, stay in this field where you're going to be protected. I pray God's blessing over you. Hey, come and eat lunch with us. And then after lunch, he tells his men, leave some extra for her. Not just the normal amount that these other girls are out here gleaning. Leave her some extra. And by the end of that day, she has 30 pounds of grain that she's hauling home. I mean, I'd have been like, thanks. It's a bit much, unless she only has a couple of 100 yards to walk to get home. But even that, carrying 30 pounds all that way back, it's a bit much. But, it's the only place they can get food, so she's grateful for it. So he just is kind of stacking blessing onto blessing onto blessing. at first sight, having just met her seemingly that day. So now on to chapter 3. Naomi finds out she's in Boaz's field, and she says, hey, he's one of our guardian redeemers, one of our kinsman redeemers. He is someone in our family who can take care of us. And you need someone to take care of, like, you're still a young woman, Ruth, and you're a foreigner, and we're two ladies who need someone to take care of us. Boaz is the perfect person. Now this takes place as the harvest is drawing to a close. So Naomi probably found out maybe on day 1 or day 2 that it was Boaz in whose field they had been working. And Ruth continues to work in that field all the way through the harvest. There's more than one crop that's being harvested. So as the harvest drew to a close, it's probably been a couple of months. It started, I think they say it started in the spring, like April, and maybe now it's June. And this is where Naomi puts her plan into action. She tells Ruth to get herself dolled up. Wash and put on your best clothes and put on some perfume and comb that hair out, child. You need to look your best. She says, Boaz, they're winnowing the grain. They're going to sleep on the threshing floor tonight. When he's asleep, go in there and lie at his feet. Now, this is a risky plan because for a woman to do this might have been interpreted by a lot of men, probably rightfully so, as an invitation to like sexual immorality. And that's not what she's trying to get out of him. She's trying to get him to put a ring on it. She's trying to get a marriage proposal. So Ruth puts her trust in Naomi to do this, that this plan is going to work. And she puts her trust in Boaz, I suppose. She's learned enough of his character over the last few months. And when he wakes up with her lying at his feet, she says the same thing he said in that prayer where it talked about the Lord's skirts or wings. That's one word with multiple meanings. And so it's getting translated. In one passage, it's saying, the Lord under whose wings you've taken refuge. And in this passage in chapter 3, she's calling it the corner of your garment, spread the corner of your garment over me, but that's the same word for wings or skirt. So Boaz didn't realize in the beginning when he's praying that the Lord will shelter her under his wings, that the Lord is going to call him, Boaz himself, to be the tool by which he covers her. Because she's asking Boaz to cover me, shelter me under your wings, cover me under your skirts, whatever. So Boaz, maybe he's older, maybe he's just never been married. I guess he's never been married. It doesn't suggest that he has. Maybe he thinks, maybe he's flattered that this young woman would notice him and want to marry him. And he's like, oh, okay. Heck, yeah, I've liked her since day one. Yeah, if you want me to marry you, I'll marry you. But he knows that there's someone else who's first in line. And so you got to do this, the right way, the legal way. So we're on to chapter 4 now. He goes to the city gate. He waits for the kinsman redeemer to come by. We never learn the kinsman redeemer's name, the would-be kinsman redeemer, because it ends up being Boaz. We never learn that person's name. He's just a footnote in history. So he calls the kinsman redeemer. He says, hey, look, you're the nearest relative to Naomi. And she's got a need. She needs someone to take care of her and take care of this property. The guy at first is like, sure, man, I want that land. I'll take all those assets. But then he realizes he's got to marry Ruth in the bargain, and he might have other sons, and so you would have two different sets of families that might end up feuding in the future. He doesn't want to deal with that. So he hands his sandal to Boaz as a sign of like, I pass the baton on to you. You're the next person in line. You can have it if you want it. So Boaz marries Ruth, and they have their child, their first son, named Obed. And if you know your Bible history, you know that Obed became the father of Jesse, and Jesse became the father of David, who became king. And David, of course, is an ancestor of Jesus. So Ruth, this girl who came from Moab, left everything she knew, converted to a different religion, was being drawn by God that whole time. She didn't realize it. She was being drawn by God into this story, and her well-being, everything she had was just given freely by Boaz. Now we see that Ruth was an admirable person. We don't have to draw comparisons right now about like whether she deserved salvation, so to speak. Like, I take the view that we're totally depraved and none of us is deserving of salvation. And so you don't necessarily draw the same exact comparison in this case, but you can draw the same comparison of how Boaz just went above and beyond to take care of her, to take care of Naomi, to bring her into the family, God's family, the covenant family of Israel. And God had a plan in all that that would eventually result in the Messiah of the world. At the end, Naomi's so happy. She's a little old lady and she's finally got her grandbaby. Although not by blood the way we would consider it, because it's her daughter-in-law with another man who's a distant relative. But legally, she is a grandmotherly type role to Obed. And so Naomi got to have the role of taking care of Obed, kind of caring for him when he was little. And the name Obed means servant. It's pretty interesting, just a little side note there. Obed served Naomi by bringing joy into her life. The final sentence of these notes here, I'll read it, says, "As with Ruth and Naomi, when God weaves our lives into his great story, his ultimate purposes lay beyond our lives and lifetimes." So that's all for my commentary on the Book of Ruth. I hope you enjoyed it, and take the time to read it. It's only 4 chapters. It's very short. I mean, you can read it in like 20 minutes. It's just a precious look at one small link in the chain, that took us from Adam and Eve to Jesus, but from Abraham to Jesus a little more directly. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please go to my friend Andy's blog if you want to see some other commentaries from other books of the Bible. He's also going to be asking some other folks to contribute, either by way of writing or maybe doing videos, I'm not sure. So go check that out. And also, please like and subscribe. Subscribe to my channel. I want more subscribers. I would love for more people to hear these lessons and hear some of these other concepts that I talk about in some of my other videos. So thank you so much. Have a great day.